Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku. And it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader, like that car riding your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
Hello and welcome to the Cardiff Central podcast. In another quiet week in Welsh rugby, but I'm sure we'll find something to talk about for the next a couple of hours or so. Cardiff fall at the final hurdle in the hunt for the URC playoff places. There's Jockey answering the call again with Wales, and this time takes Mellon with him to name a squad to tour Japan this summer. And there's a little known off-field story about a rare moment of turmoil in Welsh rugby.
You're listening to the Cardiff Central podcast.
Joining me on the panel this week, as always, Frazier. Frazier, how are you?
Yeah, not bad. Tired, but all right.
Tired of Welsh rugby. Simon Jones. Simon, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks, Dan.
And Harley Worthy. Harley, how are you?
All good, thank you. That feels weird being full name, though.
give everyone a chance to get to know us all, personal level. Right, we're going to start on field before traversing slowly towards off-field stuff. Friday evening, the last game of the regular season in the United Rugby Championship. Cardiff lost 34-24 at the hands of Stormers in Cape Town. Cardiff tries from Danny Southworth gave him a web. Harry Millard and Dav Hughes, 4 points from Callum Sheedy. Unfortunately, a red card for Danny Southworth, as there was for Damien Willemser as well on the Stormers side. A tense game at Cape Town, I think it's fair to say. Looked like Cardiff were well out of it at one point, going down to 14 midway through the first half. But Blue and Blacks battled back into it and kept it tight with 2 losing bonus points in the bag at one point until Sasha Feinberg and Gomazulu very childishly kicked a penalty with the last kick of the game to take it away from us. It wouldn't have mattered anyway, as results elsewhere went against us and we would have slipped out of the playoff places. But it means Cardiff finish 9th on the season, an improvement on last season in terms of wins, points scored, and competition points as well. A couple of 3-word thoughts on social media after the game. Reese on Twitter said, "We never gave up." Andrew on Facebook said, "Proud but gutted." And Gareth on Blue Sky said, "It's the hope that kills." Well, he said the hope kills, but I've extended it for him to the 3-word element of it. Fraser, coming to you first. Disappointing evening in terms of the playoff places, a tight game. Just how far away were we from winning that one, do we think?
It's hard to say, really. Obviously, the red card for Southworth at half an hour is a pretty big factor in affecting how we played. But then we weren't great up until that point. We conceded some. I think the tries we conceded in the first half were quite sloppy. The first 2 were just poor defence, and then another soft try when Winnett didn't tap down for that kick through. So it felt a bit like defence wasn't on it. It felt like maybe compared to previous weeks. And maybe it was like Stormers could just like push a little bit and just get through and score. It did feel a bit like if they put it together, Cardiff couldn't necessarily, or we couldn't necessarily cope with it. I think we played well in lots of different areas of the game though. I think, Sheedy and Davis kicked well in the first half. We had some brilliant pieces of play, especially in the second half. I think we would come back into it. And I mean, fair play to us to keep fighting. and to not let it run away from us, because there was a point, like you mentioned, the first half after the red card, I was like, could get a bit messy. That could really be a disappointing end to the season. And obviously, it was really disappointing. We didn't get enough out of it, and we didn't qualify. But I think, we did showcase what we can do, but then we also just highlighted some of the weaknesses. Maybe means that we're not quite there, and we never were really necessarily there to get into the playoffs. Like the line out was pretty poor at times, attacking wise. Like in key situations, we kind of just effed it up and missed chances and just didn't quite click at the right times. And I think defence in particular was unusually poor. But I mean, it's hard to say with the difficulties of being down to 14 men. But I think overall, maybe it is just a good indication of where we are this season or where we have been. We're better than last season. We're definitely competing much more effectively, especially away in South Africa. That's always difficult. But we just still haven't quite got the strength and depth to get over the line, because maybe fitness was a factor. It's the last game of the season. Looked a bit tired in the first half and just didn't seem to be quite on it as we have been. So maybe it's just a result of just not as big a squad and not as much strength and depth as the other teams have. And that is kind of where we're at. And there's a lot of positives to build on, though, and we did showcase that. But then obviously clear areas to improve on. So maybe it is a good reflection of where we are, really.
Harley, Fraser mentioned there the line-out woes. It was a bit of a theme amongst other three-word thoughts. Nathan on Twitter just said line-out, line-out, line-out. Steve said expensive, botched line-outs. And Martin on Twitter said the line-out killed us. It was 71% according to Rugby Pass. How much of an issue was that in sort of getting us going attacking-wise and putting pressure on the Stormers?
Well, I mean, massive issue. We knew, we talked about it in our preview that Stormers love chaos. They love loose ball. And if you give them a chance to steal the line out, that's exactly what they've got. They've got an unstructured defence, that they can attack against, and they've got the weapons to make the most of it. And, we'd be 5-10 metres out, and then all of a sudden we're, defending our own try line. And that's going to just completely mess you up every time. So, I mean, we spoke, even all of last season, we talked about how woeful the line out has been. I think the most disappointing thing is that for the most part, it seemed to have been going much better this season. I mean, it's still not a great line. I mean, overall in the league now, we're 14th. Only slightly better than Zebra and Munster. It's just unfortunately not good enough. I don't think it's not like you can put it down to one thing as well. You can see somewhere it's clearly a poor lift, or there's others where the throw isn't quite getting right to the top of the jumper, and you're just looking at it and just thinking, but this was fine last week. Why is it gone completely to shit now? Because all right, yes, the Stormers put a lot of pressure on them, but not that much. But then equally, we were stealing their line-out ball, but they were still getting it back, because however this happened is every time there was a loose ball that we managed to pick up, as soon as we batted it back, there was a Stormers player right there. It was the same for kick up, like kick chase, anything. Like any time we thought we might have stolen the ball off the Stormers, they got it straight back because they just seemed to be in the perfect place to receive it. I don't know if they were doing it deliberately or not, but it was just uncanny. I said, guarantee, like if they allowed Josh McNally to call both heads and tails, the coin would land perfectly on its side. Such was our luck that day. I mean, I know to a certain extent you make your own luck, and we're our own biggest enemies there. I mean, a lot of the players look tired. I mean, I did say this. We were speaking on the group chat how Doma looked like he was out on one leg, and being forced to do endless scrums for 70 minutes was just. It was almost like, was it worth us going down to 13 players just to end it? I mean, and then the real killer was then Damien Willemse got a red card, and it was like, oh, there you go, it's even numbers now. And I went, no, Cardiff don't play against 14. That's the worst thing possible.
The red card, it was the Stormers captain saying that he was passive. It just made me smile. I'm thinking, if that's passive, he's just like launched himself into his chin. I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's passive.
Well, on the referee,
subtle nod to the super sport people though, who played every other event other than the tackle during it. It was full French camera team vibes.
Simon, on the refereeing, obviously that took 6 minutes to get to the red card. I think it was from the time it stopped. There was a couple of other sort of interesting moments as well. The Sheedy sort of non-conversion thing. I'm convinced that the 50-22 ahead of Stormers' first try, the phase starts in the Cardiff half and then moves backwards. A couple of other sort of things that went against us. The Stormers guy launching himself over the try line to slap the ball away as well. There was Glenn messaged us when asking for questions today. He just sort of said, "I'm just not over the shambles of the TMO refereeing on Friday." I don't think any complaints with the Cardiff red card, but it was one where we just didn't quite get the rub of the green, where we probably did from Mr. Jockey against Munster the other week.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I know at the time I was like I felt there was mitigation on Cardiff's red because I felt the player going into the tackle had bent his knees and was lower than he would have been if he'd been upright. But seeing at half time and Harley's moment of reasoning in the WhatsApp around it was just too high. You know, if you're tackling at that height, you risk just mistiming it. And that's what he did. He obviously was coming in to try and make a hit to prevent the ball kind of going out, and it was just mistimed. And you could see it, he was gutted. I mean, you just felt for him because he was absolutely gutted. I don't think there was malice or intent in it at all. I think it was just a timing thing. The other one, and I've watched it a couple of times, was the lead up to their first try where there was a clear out on Millard that was just a flying shoulder. I don't think it made head contact, but there was no arms in it to knock him out. I wonder if he'd grabbed his head and started rolling around, which some players do. They do make a more of a scene of contact like that. But he came in like horizontally at speed, and there's certainly no kind of arms to move him out of the way. It's just all shoulder. And there was a couple of times that happened, and that was not looked at all during the game. And I think I'm all for anything that is hitting a player in the head generally should be red, I think, unless there is like real mitigation of a significant drop in height and there's nothing people can do, because I think you want it out of the game. It is, it's dangerous. It's, future career threatening in terms of the numbers of concussions. So, and I thought the Stormers one was just ridiculous. It's just, there was no need to do that. It was I think it took 6 minutes because they looked at every other reason to try and disallow the try, and then we're like, oh well, I guess we're going to have to now send this player off because it's so obvious that he's just driven up into Gabe's jaw. So I think it's what's happening with, it feels in some games of rugby the TMO is becoming more important than the referee, and I think that disempowers the referees as well, because they're not quite sure whether to make the call themselves or will someone step in and make it. And we're talking like phases later then that something's pulled back and kind of looked at again. So I think there is something about it being quick, there is something about it being right, but there's also something about when the TMO can step in. I should just say the turnover after the incident with the sending off from Man was absolutely magnificent. We had a couple of really clean turnovers in that game. I think Dan Thomas did one, Josh Adams, where it was just Thomas Young like, just get the ball in, pick it up and turn over. And I think it was a joy to hear the South African commentary on some of those that was much more positive than some of the other commentary that I was listening to in terms of that. But look, you take it. I agree with Fraser. There was a point where you thought this could then go really wrong, and it didn't. We kept fighting. We kept, and to come within 7 points. And I agree with you, Dan. It's childish to take that last penalty. But
only one thing more childish than that, and that's going for a drop goal when you're on penalty advantage. I'm looking at you, Sam Costello. Yeah. Not okay.
But
take a long, hard look at yourself.
Could we have won it with 15 maybe? But it always felt like whenever we play in South Africa, it happens too often for it to be luck. The ball bounces perfectly for the South African teams and away from our players or something like that. It just happens every time, whether it's how they kick the ball or something like that. I don't know, but the ball is just exactly where they want it to be. So yeah, was it a bad end to the season? No, as a game, it was quite compelling, back and forth, jeopardy to the end. But after the player gets sent off, as you say, Harley, they went straight up, and we had all those scrums on the 5 metre line, which were just hilarious because there's no way Domachowski had 2 legs. And as I said in the chat, the final scrum that I thought was going to be the one where we get the yellow card, I think we just ran backwards because the ball just came. They just drove us off the ball. We held our shape. They drove us off the ball, and they drove past the ball. And I don't think they ever intended for that ball ever to come out of that scrum. So when the commentators were going, well, how Cardiff got away with that one? Well, we've just waved the white flag and gone, okay, you can push us off the ball, but we won't concede a penalty.
And as much as I love the South African Supersport commentators, there is one blind spot in them, and I don't. And it's not. They forget that it's not illegal to go backwards in a scrum.
We should
As
know.
long as you don't go up or down, it's fine. You can go backwards. You can go the whole. You can start on the opposition 5 metre line and go all the way back. It's bloody horrible. It's bloody hard. I've been in a scrum where you're going back, where you go back 10, 15 metres, and it generally feels worse than running about running the pitch. Like, it's horrible to stay in that position and stay square. But
to be fair, I think that scrum was in Bridgend by the time it finished. The speaker was going backwards.
I think it was Lou Reed who used to beep the scrums were reversing when he was in the scrum, and that bounce of the ball thing, that Alex linking with the Alex Mann turnover, he sort of half slices that clearance after it, but I think it's Adams and Falatau who are herring after it. And if that sits up for one of them, we're off there. As it happens, it spins back in field, and I think it's Valemsa who takes sort of 20 metres and puts us back under pressure again. It is, yeah, there's some sort of magnets going on in the balls in South Africa, certainly. Frazier, somebody I wanted to ask about put in another big shift and has done quite consistently this season, but hasn't perhaps got many of the headlines, is Kieran Azarati. He's sort of quietly had one of his best, most consistent seasons. And yeah, going to South Africa is always tough scrum-wise, but we certainly weren't dismantled when it was full 8v8 in the way that we have been previously against South African sides. He's sort of quietly put himself, right as Cardiff's main tight head, and also properly cemented himself in Wales as 23 this season, hasn't he?
He has, yeah. I think he's clearly progressing as a player and building on. He's got talent, and he seems to be getting more consistent game on game. And I think our scrum has got better this season. And obviously against the Bulls, got absolutely battered. But I think the Bulls are an exceptional case. I don't know, but yeah, I think we hung on in there against the Stormers and did. There was some parity, and I think we got a few penalties, some more like maybe a penalty or something out of the scrum. But I think we were more solid than I anticipated initially. I was worried about just getting absolutely obliterated, and I think thanks to Azarati and Southworth when he was on, and Belcher.
Would anyone like his stats according to the URC page?
Oh, go on.
So he's played 14 games, 12 starts, no tries, no points, obviously. So with 6 successful carries out of his 32, I don't know what they count as a successful carry. He gained 13 meters, but he beat a defender, which is always great for a pop. 83% tackle success, so he made 100 and missed a few. He's won a turnover, lost a couple, 12 penalties, which for a prop, actually 12 only 12 penalties. That's less than one that's less than one a game. That's all right. Unsurprisingly, he's made no kicks. I like Alex Mann's kicking stats.
Yeah, he's
I don't know. I mean,
kicking on.
Haha. Was that a kicking?
That was half intended. Harley, someone else who you might have the stats in front of you of, but I don't know. I thought Callum Sheedy had his best tactical kicking performance of the season on Friday evening. In terms of his goal kicking has obviously been a big issue, but I think that's extended a little bit sometimes into the distance he gets off the boot and also when kicking for touch as well. But more often than not, he was finding green spaces in the backfield of the Stormers' defence on the weekend and put us into a couple of nice positions down in their 22 as well, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, he's been. I said his on-field play. I said my main issue has been is at the start of the season his defence was a bit ropey. That seems to have tightened up. I don't know if that was just him getting used to the Mellon system more than anything, or we've adapted around him. But that's looking a lot better. His kicking's great. I think one of the big problems with the kicks were all going in the right place, but maybe the chase wasn't there because, as I think we mentioned, they've all looked absolutely shagged. Like, Cam Winnett looked like he was going to fall asleep in breaks and play. I think he's top of minutes played for the season, so he might get the Iron Man trophy this year. But you just look at yeah, it's great, but yeah, the distances. So I think we're first for the number of kicks in play, and we're fifth on this kick distance. I think part of that is we do also quite like little short chips over the top, but it does sort of get you into there. I have actually got his stats up now, but his kicking success is 52, which I'm guessing is a percentage. But his kick meters are three. Well, he's just kicked just over 3 kilometers for 100 odd kicks.
Not too bad.
Yeah, it's not. I said, and he's scored 25 conversions, 4 penalties. 4 of the 6 penalties we worked out in the group chat we've kicked all season.
We will, we will pick the bones out of those stats in next week's pod when we review the season as a whole. With that in mind, there obviously, with it being the last game of the season, there was quite a few 3-word thoughts just sort of that covered the 2024-25 season generally. Rob on Twitter said performing above budget. Andy said grumpy about Treviso. Hugh said definitely making progress. And Glenn, in response to the request for thoughts ahead of the podcast recording, said that the Benetton loss will come back to haunt us as he thought it would. Simon, as it's yourself and Harley's last one of the season before we wrap up after next week, what's your sort of general reflections on the season that was for Cardiff?
Well, I think coulda, shoulda, woulda is probably my 3-word review. I think you look back at Connaught away, Treviso away, Scarlets at home, Ospreys at home. I didn't see the Edinburgh game, but I just don't feel Edinburgh are that much ahead of us to be beaten like that. I feel quite positive about it. I think it's progress. Regardless of where teams finish in the league ranking, we are the best Welsh side based on beating all the others. Let's celebrate the hubcap. But at the start of the season, all 4 sides, you'd expect us to be in the bottom of the league. For 2 to be realistically competing going into the last 2 games, the Scarlets to get in that top 8, the Ospreys to miss out probably due to losing to us, really, to not be in contention going to South Africa anyway. But I think it just shows a lot of grit, a lot of determination, a lot of working, kind of punching above our weight, really. So I think all the stats show that it's been a better season, points-wise, bonus points-wise, where we've ended up in the table. So I don't think you can really. We always knew that the restructure was going to, the rebirth, whatever, after COVID was going to be more than a 2-year job. I think going into administration probably makes it a longer job, but who knows? Considering that disruption, to come out off the back of that and get the 10 points against Ospreys and Munster was superb. To be in the fight against the Stormers, you take, if it wasn't for the disappointment of we needed to win that last game, you'd probably go, actually, to almost take 2 points from the Stormers, you go, oh, well, I'd accept that. I'm quite happy going there and doing that. Didn't expect to get anything out of the Bulls particularly. Came close to getting 1. So I think there's plenty to build on. It's why I think it's important that we keep Jockey for next year. Because I think going back to the start, I've said it before, going back and starting all over again with a new coach and a new coaching setup, I think it would set us back again. But it's classic Cardiff. Some hugely brilliant things and then some hugely frustrating moments where you think, well, we're in the ascendancy here and overthrow a line out or fail to score in the corner against 13 men. It just, progress, but I think probably Jockey and the players were thinking should have been more, which I don't think is a bad place to be. I don't think we should be satisfied with being ninth in the league. I think we've shown we can compete at that level with a few additions. So, should we be thinking of playoffs for next season, top 8 for next season? Why not? Although I would say, I think, some other sides have been way off this season. You look at where Ulster are, you look at where Munster have been, some of those sides have been really not Connaught, that are usually competing for those top 8, haven't played well. So they'll want to grow next season. It's really interesting in terms of where Irish rugby is as well. We always concentrate on our own melodramas because there are many in Wales, but Ulster missing out, Connaught missing out, Munster getting in, on the last day, really. It's not I'd be really interested to know what Irish fans are thinking about that structure, because it doesn't seem as strong as we are led to believe. But, who are we to say that? We're a Cardiff podcast. Ninth will do.
Harley, similar question to you. What's your sort of take on the season as a whole?
So I think when me, you, and Carmen would talk about previews of the season, the big one was trying to turn some of those narrow losses into wins, and I think we've clearly done that. We've gone from 4 wins to 9, or 8 even, 8 in a draw. So that's good. The attack started to look better. The defense been a bit shaky. I think the thing that I'm sort of disappointed in is that we sort of went, instead of narrowing losing games, we either won them quite narrowly, or we got tonked, and we basically, so yes, we've got 10 try bonus points this season. So I think only Leinster Stormers and possibly the Bulls have more, and then Glasgow have the same as this one, 10. Which is great, but then we've only got 3 losing bonus points out of the 9 games we lost, and that feels like, we're almost going so all out in attack that we're forgetting the defence side of things and making sure that we stay in games a bit better. I mean, some touched on it, but that Edinburgh game, that was just, I don't know if it was just because it was getting towards the end of a really tough, really long block where we had double derbies and Glasgow and trying to do right about that zebra result from the previous season. It, the form dipped. I think also it was just before the Autumn International, so we did have a few players forced, on Wales rest. But that was disappointing. And then games like we should think. And then I was looking through point scores, and actually something Steve of this parish brought up and said we only scored something like 18 points fewer than the Scarlets, but we scored 13 more tries. And that's just testament to how bad the goal kicking. And then we went down the rabbit hole and worked out our team goal kicking percentage of the season is about 60% just for conversions, because I don't know how many missed penalties we've had. But you just look at it and go, so I'm really proud we got 9th, which is a huge improvement, and it shows we're there and we should be competing. And it's we lost on basically having the exact opposite of what happened to the Ospreys last season, where they had every result goal the way we had every result goal the way we didn't want it to. I'm actually surprised Benetton Munster didn't finish as a 3-3, try bonus point draw. just to really, put the boot on us and put us down into 10th. But as much as I'm proud, I'm still looking at some of those games and just thinking we should have won. We should have had better. And I think particularly as well, Europe, I'm really disappointed with our Challenge Cup campaign. I think there's a bit too much resting and rotating, maybe. And with the Connacht game, I felt like we didn't learn, because we played them 3 times and we lost all 3. And I don't think necessarily we got better. I feel like we've just stayed the same. And Connacht have been a pretty inconsistent naff team. It's taken Bundyaki to save them a couple of times. But
all I was going to say, the point about conversions is really important, because some of those conversions missed came at games at points where we land the conversion, suddenly the crowd are up or the crowd are getting nervous, and then it's like pressure's on, But you miss them, and then that flattens the crowd as well, because it's like, oh, we could be within 7 points or within 5 or within 3, and it's all right, okay, now we're going to have to go again. So it has an effect on how the fans engage as well. And I think thinking of when it'd be interesting to, this is just me thinking about it without having any facts to it. It felt like a few of them were at crucial points in games where if we'd landed it, suddenly the opposition are like, oh, it's getting tight now, but we missed it and gave them a bit of breathing space. So that whatever happens, that's got to be resolved next year, either by doing what Gabe did on Saturday and actually trying to get closer to the posts. That was another cheap shot as well. There was no way that they died at the same time. I think he hit him with his knee. But there's a few where we just score tries out wide. It's the way we play. But there are times, there's been a couple of spectacular, the Stevens score where he's up in the air and score, that you can't not score there. But there have been a couple where I'm like, just like Gabe did on Friday night, just try and get a bit closer, try and loop round. So, it would be interesting to look at the stats of where those conversions were from as well, because I think quite a lot of them were from touchlines as well, and quite a lot of the tries we conceded were probably much closer to the posts.
It's quite weird looking at the URC stats. I mean, another point of it is I think the stats are used to rank them are awful, but we're ranked 15th for attack. Which, when you think about what everything's saying, if you look at the URC stats table, we're ranked as 15th. And it's basically because we seem to beat fewer defenders, make fewer line breaks. But I think a big part of that is because Jockey's made us into very much an off-ball team, and we're very happy kicking the ball away, defending, which is why our defence and kicking stats are a bit higher. But I mean, just to sort of hide how much this not kicking our conversions changes it. We are sort of 8th for tries scored. Right, and sort of the average tries we score 3.5 tries a game, and then basically all the teams that you'd expect to score more than this. But for points scored, I think it's only Zebra, Dragons, and Benetton who score fewer points per game than us. And my sort of arbitrary figure I've been using with Hugh in something we're thinking about doing is number of times you score or concede 30 points or more, because the way the scoreline is going, 30 seems to be the cut-off. We've only scored more than 33 times this season. Pretty much everyone else is on about 7 or 8. With the exception of Zebra and the Dragons. So it just seems like there's still work-ons, but I still have huge faith in what Jockey's doing.
Good stuff. Cheers, gents. The only other sort of on-field bit or more rugby department bit that was mentioned about in questions or thoughts this week is Ben on Twitter, who asked how long before a leavers list / more new signings come along. I guess the answer to that is, how long is a piece of string, Ben, to be honest. I suspect after the news has come out over the last few days, the smart PR move for Cardiff is to sort of sit quietly in the background for a little bit before starting announcing a raft of signings. But I don't know, maybe if we really feel like casting some bait out, we'll just chuck a massive new marquee New Zealander out there or something like that at this moment. But I imagine it'll be another summer of sort of bits and pieces rather than being organised. I suspect there's still plenty of chat going on in the background with players over contracts and new signings. So I wouldn't necessarily anticipate anything immediately. I suspect we'll hear sort of dribs and drabs over the next few weeks on that front. Next on the pod then, I mentioned it last week, but all of us at Cardiff Central Pod were sad to hear the passing of Claire O'Shea sort of last weekend. Claire was a huge Cardiff fan and a board member of CF10, who in her professional life headed up Hub Cymru Africa, Wales's leading international development and global solidarity organisation. And then in her private life, she suffered a poor experience with the NHS after a lump in her abdomen was initially misdiagnosed as IBS before, well over a year later, was correctly diagnosed as a rare form of gynecological cancer. Despite battling that, she set up Claire's campaign, which raises awareness around the poor levels of recognition of gynecological cancer among women. And that campaign has reached over 200 people coming forward to share similar experiences. Simon, you knew Claire personally. I wanted to talk about someone who's clearly a very special woman.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Really, really appreciate it. It was a really tough week last week for many of us. Thoughts with Claire's family and her partner Ridian and everyone who knew her. And I think the outpouring of memories and support and just grief really shows how much she meant to everyone who knew her. I'd first met Claire outside Trevor Brennan's bar in Toulouse, drinking baby Guinnesses in the times when I would drink. And we travelled to many away games after that, including using some of Claire's French to get us back from Racing's ground when we beat them in the first game of the European Cup one year. I think I'm still trying to work out how Felice scored a try in that game, because even on replays we can't. But yeah, and then we've been to Leicester and Harlequins and even Swansea together, and there were four of us that all had season tickets on the South Terrace. Spent a lot of time together, often putting the world to rights and having a gossip and a chat about politics and life and rugby, and there'd be a rugby match going on incidentally in the background, and every so often we turn around and Cardiff would have knocked on or something would have happened. So yeah, we're gonna miss her hugely. It's difficult to put into words how much she'll be missed by those who knew her. As you say, Dan, just a campaigner by instinct on a wide range of issues. She was also on the board of Samaritans Cymru, had her own familial experience with suicide, and just a huge heart, always up for a laugh, always a wicked sense of humour. And even after the diagnosis, which was horrendous, how she was treated and her experience of that, to put together Claire's campaign to raise the profile of not necessarily what happened to her, but use her story to raise the profile for others, to ensure that other women who experience poor treatment around gynecological cancers could have a platform to discuss that. And the evidence she gave to the Senedd around these just shows the strength of character and her determination for this not to be about her, but to be about righting the wrong that happened to her and making sure it didn't happen to others. It's incredible, really. So to get the news last week that sadly she'd lost her fight, I know she'd want us to grieve, but she'd also want us to get on with our lives and get on with enjoying it. And it was strange when you, Dan, put something out on social about Lloyd Williams joining Worcester. Lloyd Williams was one of Claire's favourite players, and I went, I must message Claire about it. And I was like, oh no, it's just strange how things happen and come up, and you realise that that person isn't there anymore. So yeah, thoughts with all her friends and family. You can kind of look up Claire's campaign. I know times are tight. If you can make a donation to it, it's done some fantastic work. And yeah, I'm sure at the start of the season, me, Howell and Greg will have our own little toast on the South Terrace to her. But yeah, really difficult week, and yeah, she'll be hugely missed for the way she was as a person. So thanks, Dan. Really appreciate the opportunity to just talk a bit about it.
That was lovely. Thank you for sharing that, Simon. Yeah, if you want to find out more about the campaign, the website is clairescampaign.cymru, and they're on Instagram as well, Claire's Campaign Cymru. Just echo what Simon said from all of us at the podcast Thoughts with her family and friends. Claire O'Shea, who passed away aged 42 last week. At this point of the pod, then, if before we get into the off-field PRA stuff, which obviously nobody will enjoy listening to, if you are listening to what you're enjoying what you're listening to, please give us a like and a subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're on. If you're watching us on YouTube, like the video and subscribe to the channel. The guys on the Rap Harley included went very in depth on all the PRA shenanigans that have taken place over the weekend. It's good to hear input from all four clubs and sort of what everyone's thinking in one place. And I'm sure everybody will be covering it on their respective club podcasts this week. The SRC final on the weekend as well. The SRC guys will be covering all of that and the fallout from the first season of that competition. The URC Rewind guys will plough on into the playoffs, no doubt. A couple of tasty-looking quarterfinals there, including Scarlet's heading to Leinster, of course. And I suspect the Women's Rugby Pod will be returning at some point over the summer now as the Rugby World Cup appears on the horizon. We'll crack on with the PRA stuff then from a Cardiff perspective, just in case anyone's been living under a rock over the weekend and has managed to miss it plastered across every news outlet in Wales. Obviously, it's been ongoing for a few weeks around clubs signing the professional rugby agreement, the new one, which takes us into the next sort of 5-6 years or so, with deadlines being set by the WRU for clubs to sign it amid pressure from NatWest over the refinancing of debts, which is quite a major part of getting this new deal across the line. Cardiff signed, as you probably would imagine, with the WRU being our overlords now, and then the Dragons followed suit at the end of the week before last, I think. The Ospreys and Scarlets hadn't signed by a deadline set. Steph Thomas of Wales Online then reported on Saturday night, and Lee on the Wrap was very disappointed that it ruined his Eurovision experience. That notice has now been served on those two clubs who are still on the old PRA, and that Steph was reporting the WRU had agreed at the board meeting on Friday to cut a region. The WRU on Sunday morning put out their own statement in which they sort of intimated they had no idea what the next step was in all reality. But the major quote was that the system will not return to the model of 4 evenly funded clubs. Fraser, from a Cardiff perspective, I guess, sort of sitting here under the wing of the WRU, not almost sort of not directly involved in this, despite it being an all Welsh rugby issue. How do we sort of feel watching this all play out?
I mean, I feel quite like, I mean, it's like Groundhog Day. I don't know. It just feels really sad to hear it all again. And we were talking about this PRA for ages. There's been so many announcements. I think we made jokes about the announcement will be made soon. It's that those kind of things have been happening, and then for this to happen, it feels quite inevitable, which is sad. It's just like, oh, of course, this is all come about. But I think that my main gripe as a Welsh rugby fan and a Cardiff fan, obviously, is just I think the communication has been so like contradictory a lot of the time and just like haphazard. I don't know who the communications officer of the WRU is or the press officer, but it just feels like the information fed to the public has changed quite drastically. And I guess that depends on what information WRU are getting from their banks and all that kind of stuff. But I just feel like it's not been very cohesive or responsible. And I think the latest article from Wales Online was quite like, oh my God, what's happening? This is cut a region immediately. It was all quite like sensationalist. And obviously that doesn't help things either, because then people react in a dramatic way, which then people get in arguments and start shouting at each other, and it causes more eruptions in an already like fraught situation. So I think there's been a lack of like responsibility from the Welsh rugby media to try and like calm things down, because we want to work together in like a really difficult financial situation to hopefully have as best parity between 4 regions as possible, because I know the pod overall wants and supports 4 regions as a thing, and as do I, and that's what I'd love to continue happening. And I don't know, it's just I don't know what the fuck's going on. And I don't think WRU necessarily know at this point, and I just think not knowing why they don't know. It's like, why is it so chaotic? Like, try and explain it to us, try and give us an insight into why it's so confusing or why there are sticking points. I know you can't go into full details of the reasons, but it just feels like we're kind of kept in the dark, or there's suddenly an announcement. It's like, this is going to happen, and that doesn't happen. So it's just really, the communication has just left me quite confused. And obviously, we are beholden to the WRU now due to circumstance, so we can't really do much about it. But I'd just like there to be more cohesive dialogue and press releases, and like a unity and cohesion around what's happening and the narrative, because it's just quite confusing and sad to constantly have to witness week on week. Yeah.
The cynic in me would suggest that the WRU creating confusion is probably part of their strategy to sort of deflect from the fact they don't really know what they're doing. But
kind of shit.
yeah. Harley, you spoke well on the wrap on it was Monday night when you recorded it. I thought one point you made was very true around, there's all these calls for sort of equal funding, but actually, is that possible to achieve when Cardiff are owned by the WRU? Obviously, the PRA says that the benefactors have to put in a certain amount of money to cover losses or top up budgets, etc. And that if the WRU are our benefactor and put that money into us as well as the payments they're making as part of the PRA, we get more money off them. If they reduce our money or give that same amount of money then to the other three clubs who have benefactors, they get more money than us. So there is very little opportunity for equity there. But I guess my question is to sort of play devil's advocate for Cardiff fans who obviously want the best for us, is that should we be perhaps prepared to receive less as a club that has gone into administration and are now WRU owned? Is that it obviously wasn't our fault, despite what some people on social media may be trying to claim, that the Helver Capital just decided not to pay. But is there still maybe an element that suggests that we've sort of got away scot-free a little bit with going into administration, and that we should therefore be prepared to take a couple of years of being less funded under the WRU?
I mean, it's certainly, again, going with the devil's advocate, because personally I just think we could argue this. Fine, if you're making those payments up to basically cover what we're already on, well, we're doing quite all right with it. So let's go, go for that. I mean, because that is one of the things that does keep coming up, is that lots of people saying Cardiff haven't been punished for going into administration, and they haven't been punished. It's like, people point, well, if you look at the likes of Worcester, who had two rogue assholes who came in, bankrupt the club to try and asset strip. I mean, the problem is with Cardiff, you can't asset strip, which a lot of people make very valid point. Is Cardiff is a very hard concept to sell as a team because we don't really own anything. We have our players, and it's basically the cash we make in based on it, and then we're basically just hoping the cash flow keeps going, and our assets really are the players. So we are a bit screwed, but at the same time, so Dan, look at the Dragons representative of the pod pointing out that actually no, what we need is to be funded to try and make us as attractive as possible, so that someone buys us out, so we end this situation as soon as possible. I mean, for all we know, because WRU are just that terrible communicators, that might just be what this is the end of fair and equal funding is, because one way or the other, someone's going to have less money than the others. And I appreciate that Ospreys and Scarlets, both the supporters groups and the people in charge, don't want it to be them, because I know fully well if we were in switch places with them, chances are most of our fans would be calling for the same, because that's how we acted with the Dragons under WRU ownership. It's all open up the accounts. They've given this much money, which no matter how many times people say no, that's not true. They basically paid their thing of paying the ground rent or whatever, and that was it. It's their responsibility to that. I mean, Abby Tierney's came out on that Scrum 5 interview when we first got bought under WRU control, said this is what we expect to be paying. So they seem to know roughly what the figures are. And so I do wonder, because this has been going on for months, and the other regions must have known we were in trouble. I think the absolute cynic in me, and it's everyone against us, part of me just says they're just gutted that we got bought through, so they couldn't buy all our best players. And they're going to have to wait for them to come out of contract before they sign Evan Daniel and Zed Davis and the likes. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm not saying that's what happens at all before a lawyer starts knocking at my door. I'm just saying the cynical part of me can see that as an opinion. I mean, to be honest, it's just a shit situation. The WRU, the way they've handled this, I said this again on on the wrap, like leaking stuff at 10:30 at night. I mean, I know Abby Tierney was best mates with the former Tory government, but there's no need to run the WRU like the Conservative government of hoping that people aren't on Twitter at or Facebook at half 10 in the evening. Come on, for every person who's excited about Eurovision, there's a bored other spouse who is just like, "Can we please go to bed?" Sat on their phone. I'm definitely not talking from experience. Oh, wait a minute. No, my wife doesn't listen. It's fine. It was definitely me. I was that bored individual who was waiting for the whole thing to be over.
No, I
But
think it's a valid point though around funding us to say, like you said, what Dan mentioned, the Dragons rep who knows this very well, I would imagine, about if the WRU was to drop our funding or fund us less in comparison to the other Welsh sides, and we suddenly start dropping off results wise and are the fourth best club constantly, you end up in a situation like the WRU had, where the Dragons were on their books for what was it 6-7 years, I think, in the end, before they ended up taking a quid off Buttress and Co. and giving them the keys to that whole site essentially. That's I think they will have learnt the lessons from that, and yeah, it might end up a year or two of us having a little bit more money directly from the WRU in terms of them topping us up, but ultimately that's probably a better way to do it than immediately cutting us and then us staying on their books for a lot longer and still ending up with a lot of money anyway off them. So yeah, that would be my take on that as well. Simon, Rob on Twitter sent a message in just before we started recording, which was similar to the question I had already down. Rob said, do the shenanigans of the last couple of days regarding the WRU worry us about how trustworthy they are now they are our owners? And yeah, my question was sort of how concerned are we as Cardiff fans going forward about being WRU owned? Does that put us more at risk of being the side that does get closed down, even though we have signed the new PRA, or being a side that if it ends up in some sort of 3+1 or 2+2 funding model, being that lower echelon side and almost run as a development club for one of the other sides who are getting more money?
I mean, I don't think any of us want to be owned by the WRU. I don't think that is in the thoughts of, it might be in the thoughts of some fans, but certainly none that I've spoken to. None of us want to be here. None of us want union ownership. I think, the idea of us being punished for going into administration, I think you've got to recognise the emotional process of going into administration as well. It's not a light decision. If I'm honest, just get it done. Whatever the union want to do, just get it done, so we can either move forward or back, and everyone knows where they are. That's just how I feel about it. To take Fraser's point, we've gone round and round on this, backwards and forwards, 4, 3, 2+2, 3+1. I just feel exhausted by it to a certain extent, and just whatever the game plan is now, just do it. And if it's Cardiff, yeah, will I be happy about it? No, but it's done, and that decision is made. And I think now those in a position of decision making within the union need to just make a decision. We can't go back in 12 months' time, 18 months' time to go, well, what's the ideal number? I think probably behind the scenes, finances have changed. I think maybe the agreements around the loan have changed. I'm lost for words really, because it's just, what can you say? I think we're in as vulnerable position as anybody else. However, the idea of professional rugby without something based in the capital does seem less sustainable than going forward and not having anything based in the capital. I think that is, a saving grace around this situation. But the not signing of the PRA, I think understanding more around, okay, what's the reasoning around that? Is it that everyone was going to get the same funding and Scarlets and Ospreys went, well, Cardiff shouldn't get the same funding because you're their benefactor as well. We should get more. It's led to a situation where it now threatens all of it rather than a little bit of it. And I think I've seen plenty, although I'm not on X anymore, and I'm glad I'm not, that we're being blamed for this situation. It's because of Cardiff. Cardiff should be the one to go under. And then in the same breath, people going, you've got to think about the jobs and the players at the other clubs. It is competitive. It's a horrible situation for all full professional organisations to be in. I think a decision's just got to be made, whatever that decision is. It's probably not going to make everybody happy. Now it won't, because essentially a decision has been made to move forward with those that have signed. But I guess, like you said, Fraser, I want to play the Scarlets. I want to play the Ospreys. They're good games. I feel for their supporters. I think this is divisive amongst the supporters as well. There'll be some that will revel in that divisiveness because it drives engagements. But I think for most of us, we've stood shoulder to shoulder on numbers of issues. As when I was part of the trust, working with the other supporters trust, we've stood shoulder to shoulder on some of this, the way in which the game is being developed. We're in a really difficult position. A decision's just got to be made, and whatever that is, and yeah, we'll find out. But it needs to be made.
Yeah, just to pick up on a few points there, I think from the outside, obviously it's not our place to tell Ospreys and Scarlets supporters and stuff what to do or think at this moment in time. But I think from the outside, it would be helpful if the Ospreys and Scarlets in their statement sort of put forward their angle on it somewhat, because their joint statement and then the letter from Lance Bradley, sort of the open letter from them, obviously very accusatory towards the WRU and pointing fingers around, this sort of supposedly sudden and surprising move. Although it does seem to have been coming a few weeks at least. We heard that they threatened that they would give notice on the PRA, but yeah, it would certainly help to understand exactly what the situation was, what their queries were, and what their reason for not signing. Because from the outside, yes, they're not happy with the PRA clearly, but they don't appear to have any obvious leverage over the WRU. If the WRU sort of come back and say, your queries, we're not sort of backing down to that, this is the deal, sign it, or you're getting notice served, and then they don't sign it, and then you sort of go, what were you hoping would happen beyond getting notice served on you? What actually, you've put your club at very serious risk of not existing there if they go down to 3 as the 2 haven't signed it. For what gain, I'm not obviously sure. Not to say there isn't one, there may be, but I think that would be helpful to understand exactly what their sort of thinking is around their actions over the last sort of 10 days, 2 weeks or so. And then just from a Cardiff point of view moving forward, Rob also asked a question on Twitter around sort of, do we think we're supposedly on more money now, us and the Dragons, as signing up to the new PRA. Do we think we'll spend up to that money? I think it was Ben James did a piece on Wales Online that mentioned a couple of the numbers. So the suggestion is that we'll receive £6.5 million worth of funding from the WRU, or payments from the WRU, next season, up from 4.5 million. That'll be broken down into 5.1 million as a base player budget. Then there's £800,000 ish worth of debt repayments against the £6 million that we already owe, which I think is quite a good figure. Shows that £6 million should come down relatively quickly if that were to continue. And then there's £400,000 worth of sort of unlockable extras, which when the PRA was first started to be leaked sort of pre-Christmas, that whole thing around, if the Welsh Rugby Union ask us to rest a player and we agree to it, then we can have a bit more money, and if we play them in a certain position, we can have a bit more money. But that, although we are owned by the WRU, I think there will still be an autonomy for the rugby department to turn those requests down if they don't feel it correct, and the budgeting is done based on that base £5.1 million, and anything extra is sort of a welcome added bonus. So yeah, I think for us, for Cardiff in the short term, certainly just full circling it back to Cardiff on all this, not a lot changes. We still crack on with trying to get back in private ownership. I think that becomes more of a priority now, certainly, just to get a voice around, proper voice around the PRA table, because obviously our voice at the moment is, or PRB table, our voice at the moment is a WRU angled voice. But yeah, hopefully we can continue building what we've started to build on the field over the last 2 years across the next couple of years.
I think as well, Dan,
Also,
if there was a really good Glad blog that came out today, just kind of trying to pull everything apart. And, if as was in that means that the loan isn't taken off the other two sides, the West Wales side, that's a real issue. That's a real concern in terms of the financial stability of those sides. And, it isn't, I can understand not signing an agreement. Well, okay, you have to live with the consequences of not signing that agreement, but I just don't see how that's viable. Not, leaving those two sides with that loan whilst it's cleared onto a different bank sheet for the others is a really serious step. I think, I could see a situation whereby the union goes, okay, we're going to fund you slightly less, but we'll take your loan anyway, but we won't give you as much back. The indication of maybe not taking that loan off them at all, I don't know. There's a bit of me that's just uncomfortable with that thing. So I don't think that's finding a solution. I think that's going, well, you two have signed. Here you go. You can have that. The other two just, struggle on. There's something that just doesn't sit comfortably about that. The extent of that approach, I don't think that's finding a solution to this. I think that's, just doesn't. I don't know why. Well, I do know why. It just doesn't seem particularly fair in terms of the loan agreement and what that means.
Yeah, it comes back to the fact that they shouldn't have put it on us in the first place, really.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, for me, the sticking point with that loan thing is apparently the NatWest returns for refinancing this loan are based on all four sides signing that PRA because of the way the model works for the funding. They basically don't want it that surplus profit goes to the region. So, it's that boom or bust thing that we've been complaining about for years, which sounded really good at the time and now went completely to shit because of COVID. And it's like, well, will we actually get much more funding? Because if the WRU can't refinance that loan, that seems to be the big predicator of what all these new funding changes are. Unless they're looking at a way to fund the Dragon and Cardiff for signing it because we've signed the document thing, or does that make the PRA completely null and void because it needs all 5 party signatures? That's the thing that I'd be quite interested in.
I think the way that will happen, and this is just based on what people have said about the old PRA and the new one and the need to refinance the debt, I think the WRU will take the loan back off the Scarlets and Ospreys balance sheet and onto their own. But I think what they'll then do is basically the old PRA, the reason they have to refinance it is that the money element of it that the WRU paid the professional clubs there wasn't much sort of secured money. It was all around, if we make profit, we'll split that between you, but if we make a loss, we'll take that, we won't give you as much money. So I think with those two clubs on the old PRA, basically they'll take the debt off them, and then that debt will be seen as a loss by the WRU. So the payments that go to them, they'll effectively be financial clawbacks. So those clubs will be paying it via those financial clawbacks, but the money won't sit on their balance sheet. Is how I imagine it goes. And Simon, that your point is still absolutely correct. That is potentially terminal for those two businesses, particularly the Ospreys, I would suggest, who don't have as solid base as the Scarlets do financially with their consortium there, and how it all impacts the St. Helens move and stuff as well. I think, particularly for the Ospreys, there's major questions in that regard. But hopefully, I think the general message from us as Cardiff supporters is that, we hope to still have 4 teams here, however that happens, whether, it's not ideal for some, but at least the 4 teams will survive, and that it needs to happen quickly. Well, before the start of next season, really, something needs to be in place, but I have a bad feeling that with a full 2-year notice period, this could continue to drag out for quite some time. Right, Right, unless anyone's got any more burning things they want to say on the PRA, we'll try and finish with some actual rugby stuff just to end the pod. It was announced today, as we're recording, Tuesday afternoon. It was announced that Wales will have an interim coaching staff for this summer's tour of Japan, and it's a lot of very familiar names for blue and black supporters. Matt Sherratt will once again lead the coaching ticket as interim head coach. On this occasion, he'll be joined by Gethin Jenkins as interim defence coach, and then the rest of the coaching team will be made up of Danny Wilson, current Harlequins head coach, as forwards coach. Adam Jones will once again be scrum coach, again on secondment from Harlequins, and Tyrese Thomas will be on secondment from Gloucester as assistant forwards coach / sort of skills coach. Lots of familiar faces there. Of course, Danny, our former head coach, Adam Jones and Tyrese Thomas, former players, and TRT, a former coach as well. In the squad itself, Jockey's named a 33-man squad for the 2-test tour of Japan this summer. There's 8 Cardiff players involved. They are Liam Belcher, Kieran Azarati, Teddy Williams, Alex Mann, Talupe Falatau, Ben Thomas, Josh Adams, and Cam Winnett. Simon, I'm going to come to you first because I'm not sure we've spoken to you about sort of Jockey being head coach of Wales before. Thoughts on him doing that again, and also, is there any impact on Cardiff? I think he's been quite clear that he doesn't want to take the job full time, but just I'm thinking more of a kind of, he doesn't seem to be getting any time off here. Even Mellon, they're going straight into test camp and then they're coming back into Cardiff stuff. Do we, would we benefit maybe from having a bit of time off and being really fresh for next season?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think anybody would benefit from time off after the last few weeks, and he's going to go on tour where this stuff is still going to be rumbling away, the politics of the game in the background, and he's handled everything media-wise that's been thrown at him in the way that we know he can, which is with openness and honesty and what he knows, and his focus has been on the team, and that's where it stops. And I hope that the union continue to protect him from some of those discussions. Obviously, they didn't do a great job towards the end of the Six Nations, where there was questions asked that it wasn't for him to answer, and being sent out there to do that. I think we've talked about before that the feeling that his time with Wales has improved him as a head coach in terms of, I think we talked about using players, substitutions happening a bit more at points where it can influence the game rather than waiting too long. So I think it would be really interesting to hear from him in some form about what has he really taken. Dan, I think you make a really good point about freshness for him and for Gethin. It's not going to be an easy summer. It's not an easy place to go. The pressure's on to end the losing streak. It's seen as a favourable tour because it's not one of the larger kind of international sides, but it's a tough ask. It's a tough ask. So yeah, I think the point just around will have time to kind of decompress and unpack it all and just spend time away from the game, so you come back with some fresh ideas, with some fresh impetus, and ready to go is a real concern. He'll know himself what he needs and the time he needs, and I'm sure Cardiff will give him that time to rest and spend time with family and away. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, as I said earlier, I wouldn't want him to go. I think he's building something and we need him to see that through. I wouldn't want him to go as a skills coach. I think he does have the potential to be a international level head coach. He's probably a few years, he himself would admit that. I think he has, kind of a few years from that. This is his first head coaching role. So I'd hope he'd see out, another season with us, another couple of seasons, get us stable and a squad that he feels has the right balance. But again, he seems somebody who's keen to learn. Who are we to stop him? Be interested in getting Jenkins going back into that setup as well. So best of luck to them. It's going to be a tough couple of tests, but hopefully bring back a win and you go again for the autumn. The question is, when is a new head coach going to be appointed? Because it does feel like this is dragging on. I understand getting people in before you get other people in. You've got to put the jigsaw together. But at some point, we've really got to sort that out. And it can't be kind of October. Ideally, something's made before they go in June. Is it June they go? I don't know when the tests are.
The 2 tests are the first 2 weekends of July, I think.
July.
But yeah, I thought Jockey obviously done a press conference post squad announcement today. I thought he spoke quite well just about how he sees his role this summer as laying the foundations for the new coach coming in, preferably with a couple of wins. The new man doesn't have to come in with that sort of monkey on his back straight away. Hasn't been asked to sort of do anything in particular around styles of play or around like squad selection. There's nothing that said we have to go full strength and take all our best players. There wasn't anything that said we had to take all the young players and treat it as a development tour either. I think he goes there with a squad that balances that quite well, and with an approach that won't be too heavily detailed. He said he hasn't looked at Japan at all. They're not going to focus too much on them, just about sort of basic skills and getting them right, which I don't know, it's a sad indictment that the national team needs to sort of focus on that, really. But it's not unfair for where Wales are at the moment and after the last few years. Frazier, player-wise, obviously 8 Cardiff players there in the squad. Anyone sort of jump out as particularly deserving for you?
I think, Belcher is probably the one I feel most happy for. I mean, I'm obviously chuffed for all of them. I think for him, his age, he's 29 now, is he? Something like that?
I think it's about that, yeah.
Something like that. But, he's been a stalwart for Cardiff for years. He's the club captain, and he's played really well consistently for a long time. I was a bit surprised he was in the squad, but but I'm very happy for him, and I think it's something that I think he would be so proud to have attained that. I think it's a real, because I can't see him necessarily staying in the Wales squad for years to come, but to have the opportunity to go to Japan with Wales and represent his country, I'm sure he's going to be absolutely delighted, and I think he's very deserving it. He's the club captain for Cardiff. I imagine he's going there for like a morale and kind of atmosphere kind of thing as well for the squad. So I'm really happy about Belcher going. And obviously, I mean, I need to say Teddy Williams deserves to be there, and I can't wait to see him hopefully start. I think he deserves to start those games, especially with those players who aren't coming, like David Jenkins and Adam Beard. I think I'm excited to see him kind of continue his development and continue flourishing as a second row. He's come on leaps and bounds this season, and I'm excited to see that on the international at an international level. So I think those two probably stand out most for me. And then we've got Alex Mann as well, who's managed to get in there, which I'm pleased about. We've mentioned about him being a bastard in the best possible way. So I'm glad he's made it in there, and I'm sure he'll do well on the tour. I'd like to see him, come on off the bench or however he does it. I think his work rate and how hard he's tried this season. Again, it's like he's deserved it. The call up, so I'm excited, happy to see that.
Harley, sort of flip side then. Is there anyone from Cardiff, I suppose, as a primary focus, but just generally as well, who we think is unlucky to miss out on the squad?
I mean, I think two names from a Cardiff perspective. I think two names that jump out. No James Botham. I think he's been a bit of a mainstay Gatland player. Jockey seems like him. I don't know if he's picked something up or if it is just because the way he's sort of gone with that back row. You've got Wainwright as a sort of 6'8", Falatoja at an 8'8", Mann 6'7", Tommy Raffles a bit, and Josh McLeod basically, who's had a fantastic season. Yeah, let's not make no bones about it. Josh McLeod's been excellent this season, and he sort of fills up both them roles. So I think it's probably take one or the other. And Jockey said, he wants to reward players for having great club seasons as well. And it also gives both them a bit of a chance to rest. He's had a bit of a he's been sort of falling in that typical Cardiff back rower trope of getting injured for Wales duty, just about getting club fit, then getting knackered again on Wales duty. So that'd be good. I know a lot of people call him for Gabe Hamer-Webb, who I think if he'd been called up, I would have said absolutely deserved. But equally, if you look at how Jockey, as we keep talking about how Jockey likes his wings, I feel like Keelan Giles and having Blair Murray is that, they're probably the better choice at left wing. And then if you're going to give Max Page some game time, he'd probably be the better deputy for Adams with an eye to the future and his 13 cover. Here it is. We've almost gone to what is essentially a World Cup squad because it's only the 2 games. I say that's about. I'm surprised someone like Aled Davis didn't get a nod with the scrum halves. Well, I don't know if he just didn't want to, but Ruben Morgan Williams certainly. But I said this is a squad where I have no issue with any player who's in there. Really, I think every single player's deserved it. I did raise an eyebrow at seeing Chris Coleman's name in there. But seeing not in the Wales Online Press, but I think to the South Wales Argus, they said basically that's an Adam Jones selection. That's someone who Bomb wants to work with because he sees potential for a world-class tight head. And if Bomb can see it, I'm not gonna argue. He knows far more about scrummaging than I ever will. Yeah, I think other than that, Ellis maybe slightly unlucky, but as I said, I think with the way Jockey's gone, he's sort of gone for Max Page as that versatile option, and then you don't really have a space then for another back 3. So you're going for that sort of 4th centre. Other than that, I think basically a lot of the other names are either injured or they've said they're purposefully being rested.
Yeah, I think on the Game Haber-Webb one, there was a couple of comments on social media immediately after the squad from a few Cardiff fans who sort of decided that must mean he's off to England this summer. But like you said, Harley, I don't think he was ever nailed on for the squad necessarily. He's had a great end to the season. Don't get me wrong, we've all seen how good he's been. But there's a relatively settled nature to that back 3. Tom Rogers has been there a lot. Blair Murray was obviously excellent in the Six Nations, was closer to Lions selection probably than Wales selection. And then Max Page has been the breakout and has got the versatility about him. Josh Adams is continuously world class whenever he's fit. So, yeah, there wasn't an obvious spot for Gabe Hamer-Webb in there with Giles being your nippier left winger and then Ellis Mee also being there or thereabouts. Rio Dyer, somebody who has had a major fall off, but is could still have been considered for selection, having been one of the better players last calendar year for Wales. But yeah, I wouldn't immediately rush for Cardiff fans to sort of say, like, run around arms waving that Gabe's off. You very well could still be staying, just that it hasn't quite fallen for him this time. And then I'd made a note on the running order of just writing Teddy time in capital letters because I'm going to be like, that is, I think he's a Newcastle fan who's got like NUFC across his belly. That's going to be me with Teddy time across my belly now. I've decided I'm going to start whipping my top off at games for everybody to enjoy because we've mentioned it, I think, in the last 2 international windows that it must finally be Teddy time to start for Wales, and it hasn't quite happened. But with Teddy and Ben Carter being the only sort of out-and-out second rows in that squad, Freddie Thomas there or thereabouts, and
I say James Ratty's more of an out-and-out second row than Freddie Thomas.
Ratty, but they're both sort of there's all you can put them in 4-6 if you want to in that category as well. But it's got to be time for Teddy to start, and you'd think he probably goes out there looking at the 4 of those locks as the primary line-out caller as well. I would imagine. Carter perhaps has done it for the Dragons, but I'd put Teddy as a better line-out forward than Carter.
I think typically when he's been fit, it's been George Knott or Matthew Screech who's done line-out calls for. I think actually Wainwright's probably done a little bit.
Yeah.
Because obviously Carter's been out a while. But so I'd say Teddy's probably the one who does it week in, week out. I'm not so sure about Freddie Thomas with Gloucester. Potentially he might be the line. I know he goes up and he's one of their key jumpers, whether he's at 4 or 6. But yeah, also if you're going to employ a system, well, I don't know. That might be a thing with TRT. It depends who's going to be sorting out the line out with your forwards coach. If you're basically using the Cardiff system, then Teddy's your man because he's the one who's been running all the calls. But if maybe you've got one of the Gloucester coaches, that's that'll be your.
Yeah,
You'll lean
I
it more
think
towards that
I
way.
think the only thing would be I think TRT. I don't think he's actually a senior coach at Gloucester. I think he's like
No,
a
he's a skip. He's a skip.
transition or something, isn't he?
I think
Like,
it's a similar, yeah, a similar thing where it's a transition type thing.
yeah.
So yeah,
So
it depends
maybe
on how they're going to run that line out.
we'll wait and see that. But it's got to be Teddy time. It's got to be right.
Watch him be benched for both games now.
I'll be
Just 'cause you said
gutted.
that.
I'll be having to scrub my
On the
tattoo
plus
off.
side, you can put a picture of yourself as soon as he comes off the bench. Because I feel like that's even more, no pun intended there, more of an impact there for you mean if he's coming on as an impact player.
Just a
You
massive.
do wonder whether Jockey will need a couple of players in key positions that understands how he wants them to play as well. So you've got Talupe at 8, you have Teddy Williams in the second row, maybe Azarati, Ben Thomas, Josh Adams, and because it's an interim, it's kind of like, does he want a few of those players? I'm not saying all of them start, but a few of those players on the pitch at a given point to be able to communicate to others, this is what we do in this situation, this is what we want to see. Obviously, we'll have a decent amount of time with them before with the squad before going, but maybe that would play in Teddy's favour as well in terms of just a familiar voice to the coach.
Absolutely. Any more on Wales squad or anything?
The other thing is, it's nice to see Archie Griffin back. I know he hasn't really played a huge. I know he played against Bristol in the game in the stadium. Actually, I thought he played pretty well. I don't think he's set the world on fire, but it was, it sort of showed that he hasn't lost anything from that Australia tour. So it's good to see him coming back to that. I do quite like, because I'm loving lineouts, that as far as I can see, Tommy Reffel the only one of the back 5 players who doesn't regularly jump lineouts. So that's quite promising, because at least now we've got variety, we've got options there. I know Josh McLeod does jump up there. He's probably not a main jumper, and that's something I think Alex Mann's added to his game quite well this season. So that's one thing I'm quite excited to. The centres, though, is something interesting to me, because it's basically, if you don't have Ben Thomas at 12, it completely changes how that backline set up. But also who you pick at 30. If you've got Ben Thomas at 12, do you go for Johnny Williams as probably the most like for like of having like a Mason Grady or a Max Llewellyn on there at 13, or do you go for Joe Roberts for his defensive solidity, and to be fair, he's a bit of a baller as well, or do you go really rogue and start Max Page and just go for out and out gas and youthful enthusiasm?
Good news is they're all quite exciting options, rather than the usual one of wherever we sort of go, oh, not Nick Tompkins again, or something like that.
He's not to be seen and was not mentioned at all in the press. I'm guessing that's a decision.
No one is missing him, I think, is the unfortunate thing.
And then the other talking point would be 15. So I mentioned Blair Murray's obviously primarily a full. He's basically been switched to fullback because of him playing there for Wales at the Scarlets. And then you've got Cam with it. And does Jockey go for Cam, who, I'll be honest, probably doesn't need the rest, but I think he deserves this Wales call up, it's almost to reparations for being absolutely shafted last time. But I mean, Blair Murray is electric. I think he's got to be in that back 3, whether it's 11 or 15. So like I said, it'd be interesting how Jockey balances that. And does Jockey keep his 6-2? Does he keep going with 6-2 all the way through?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Is Rap continuing through the summer? I don't know what your guys' plans are.
I believe Rap will be covering the summer. We'll be covering the summer games, probably mentioning Lions, and it'll be there. It might be part crew most of the time, or getting other people to fill in. Just a heads up, I might be asking one of you guys to come. Probably just about 10 minutes before we're due to go on air after a really heavy loss is what I did to Dan all of last season.
I'll be checking the results before accepting any invites. That's for certain. Gents, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon on the pod. As I mentioned, we've got one more for our season. We'll be back next week. We'll review the season as a whole and perhaps hand out a couple of pod awards as well. So keep an eye out for that tweet. We'll ask for some nominations for your players of your seasons and that sort of thing. But Fraser, Harley, Simon, thank you very much. And thank you for listening. Until next week, goodbye.
That was the Cardiff Central Podcast. Please rate, review and share us on socials if you can, and join us again next week for more of the same. And until then, enjoy your rugby.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Kick off summer with Memorial Day savings at Lowe's. Right now, get 5 Scott's Naturescapes 1.5 cubic foot mulch bags for just $10. Plus, get up to 40% off select major appliances and save an extra $50 on every $500 you spend on select major appliances $396 or more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 5/28. Mulch offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details.